We have congregated to... That's a bit too loud. We have congregated... That's still a bit too loud. We have congregated today to continue our beautiful adventure with... what was it? Useful notes on objectivism. As provided graciously to us by TV Tropes. Oh, this symbol here that you can kind of barely see is supposed to be I think a lampshade. I think it is supposed to be a lampshade. Yes. All right. So, last time we stopped somewhere midway. We went through logical fallacies, I believe. Yes. Because we had the conclusion of Rand emphasizing the logical hierarchy and empirical, or hierarchy, or hierarchy. Yes. And empirical contextuality of knowledge. Yes. And now time would be for the ethics. And what was that message? I think I know what that was, but hey, that is me not staying in control of my communication devices. Anyway, ethics. Ethics is the area of philosophy that deals with the concept of the good. What is good? What is evil? And most importantly, where do notions of good and evil actually come from? This latter question is known as meta-ethics. Now, this is the part of this long article where all the mind screw over epistemology actually pays off. The good is a universal, and as such, every one of the four earlier answers to the problem of universals has a significant influence on meta-ethics. Alright, so the puzzles are supposed to start coming together, and if you don't remember the puzzles, then... wait a second, I'm not in focus, am I? Come on, yes. And if you don't remember the puzzles, then the best I can do is to refer you to the previous part of this video, which should be on the YouTube channel and might still actually be on the Twitch channel, yes. Yes. Now, that for a Platonic realist, there is a form of goodness which exists in heaven, and the good is that which approximates the form of goodness. Note that things in this reality can at best approximate, or approximate, I think, since this is like the action, the form of goodness. This entire world and everyone and everything in it are inherently flawed. If this sounds familiar to you, it should. Most monotheistic religions have God as their form of goodness. Yes, the original origin. And... which complicates things ever so slightly if you think about it a little bit more critically, but... And the Christian concept of original sin is arguably derived from this position. For a moderate realist, there is an essence of goodness, which subsists in things that are good. Thus, certain things are good in themselves, i.e. intrinsically valuable, independently of their consequences for any other entity. Some of the more extreme branches of the environmentalism mentalist movement subscribe to this theory and argue that untouched nature is intrinsically good. I mean, it is intrinsically valuable, certainly, but There is certain value in having some untouched nature, yes, but this concept of calling it good, I understand that this is in a more abstract meaning of good, but still disputable. Please note, although Aristotle was a moderate realist, he did not argue that the good derived from an essence. He argued that something is good if it serves its natural function. The function of a sword is cutting off heads, and thus a good sword is one that is very effective at cutting off heads. This argument influenced Roman Catholicism. Via Saint Thomas Aquinas, the Catholic doctrine of natural law derives from Aristotle, with God determining the natural functions of things. God determining the natural functions of things. Yes. For a nominalist, the good is more or less a label. It is assigned for various purposes, but these purposes are determined entirely by human consciousness. There is no relationship between objective reality and the concept of good. This position tends to be accepted by many postmodernists and many epistemological skeptics, people that argue we cannot reach valid knowledge. At the very least, these people will argue there has never yet been a satisfactory argument that bases morality in reality. And some of these will argue a satisfactory argument that does this is either impossible, or at least very difficult, to prove or impossible to formulate. Rand, being a conceptualist, denied that the good exists independently of either human consciousness or objective reality. She argued that value, i.e. that which is good, means a value for an entity. This means that the objectivist concept of the good is not what most philosophers would call objective, which to most modern academics means that the universal, the good, must exist outside of human consciousness. Rand would call this intrinsic rather than objective. But nor is it subjective, i.e. unrelated to reality. So, according to Rand, the concept the good originates somewhere within the relationship between human beings and objective reality. Originates was the main verb here. The concept the good originates somewhere within the relationship between human beings and objective reality. Yes, that is an elusive strictly speaking relative thing. Yes, like this would be axiological relativism? Okay. I mean, in theory it should be that. In practice that name might be taken but by something slightly different. Yes. There is a feature of the human condition from which the concept of the good originates. Objectivism well, yes, it is kind of handy to be able to, like, label things as good or bad. Yeah, there is a certain feature of the human condition from which the concept of the good originates. Feature. I mean, yeah, kind of like attempting to thrive, basically. Objectivism argues that this specific feature is the fact that life is kept in existence by choice. You are alive. Unless some... Wait, are Necrons technically alive, or... If you are a Necron, please write in a comment. How exactly do you identify? Are you... Because... I'm kind of wondering if I can safely assume that all of my listeners are alive. Perhaps, maybe I am speaking to ghosts. Or predominantly ghosts? Could be kind of funny, thinking about all those Manitus of things, as Graham Masterton in my previously read book, yes, mentioned. I mean, he brought up that topic of every item having its own consciousness and its own spirit, yes. All the little and major spirits, like being, to some extent, graced or disturbed by my producing of weird audio waves right now. How many recipients do I have, really? According to Twitch, not many. But within this room, still. Yes, and, well, actually, ghosts could be intercepting, like, some electronical message, like, without being registered as the viewers, so you never know. Anyway, staying alive requires that you act to secure the things that maintain your life: food, water, etc. Your life is not kept in existence automatically, but rather by a constant process of self-generated action. As in an action that is generated by yourself and not an action that is generated by the action itself. Unless it is. This is what Rand meant when she said, without life, the concept of value is impossible. Moral concepts are a human subject's response to an inescapable, objective fact about the human condition. That we must struggle to survive, yes. Many arguments against Rand target this element of her philosophy. She basically said that there is a pre-moral choice that individual human beings have to make before morality becomes relevant. Morality emerges from this specific context, just like all concepts come from a specific context. This context just happens to be individual human beings that choose to live. Could probably be phrased in a slightly more elegant way, but okay. Remember, if you just sit down and make absolutely no choices at all, you will do nothing. Mostly. Do nothing for a sufficiently long span of time, and you will die. Yes and no, because like other people could insist on you not dying, and you can be like, yeah, provided you have no like external aid insisting that you keep on living. Yes, indeed. Basically, objectivism argues that the purpose of moral concepts is to facilitate human life. Thus, for any agent, the good is that which facilitates and advances their life. which is determined by their human nature. And agent here is basically the one who acts. Yes, it's for people that have English as their second language or third or whatever. This nature of agency and being an agent, it may sound a little bit surprising. Again, note the contextuality of this. Rand was talking about human beings that have decided to live. This standard may or may not apply to any hypothetical vampires, aliens, mutants, eldritch abominations, etc. Additionally, objectivist ethics deals with life, which is not a constant parade of emergency situations like alien invasion and zombie apocalypse scenarios. Complex situational analysis is required for any specific moral dilemma, and all objectivism can do is provide very broad principles about what can be generally said to be moral. Thus, objectivism does not claim it will provide easy, pre-packaged right or wrong answers that relieve objectivists of the responsibility to apply the principles themselves. No. Objectivism is not here to hold your hand. Now, we know what the good is. Do we? I mean, theoretically, yeah, so what is good? This begins the normative ethics, where objectivism outlines a series of virtues that generally will lead to the acquisition and maintenance of the good. To avoid taking too much time, objectivism places emphasis on being rational, using reason as best as one can, thinking for oneself, looking at the facts of reality as they present themselves to you, rather than depending on the opinions of others, developing confidence in one's competencies, and striving towards one's goals. So, now we know the objectivist picture of the good. What is the evil? The evil for any agent is that which constrains or damages their life, and that which is counterproductive for their life is determined by their human nature. Important point. Humans have a specific nature, which means that, in general, the interests of all human beings are in harmony. Rand specifically denied that the world is a zero-sum game, economically speaking. Success and happiness for any specific agent does not necessitate that any other agent has lost out. That's actually a very interesting point. I feel like this is one of those points that she might have some interesting chapter in one of her books on. You know, reading old books is basically having the ghosts speak to you. But that is basically all. Effectively, if you are not one of the elite, yes, one of the creme de la creme that is witnessing me right now, then you are effectively listening to a ghost of me. And even if you are, I mean, practically speaking, you are. this gets complicated rather fast, you know? Because when do you ever directly deal with another human being? If ever. And also, that is when, where the dialogue philosophy, or the philosophy of dialogue, comes as a beautiful cavalry to your rescue. Well, according to some special snowflake philosophers, at least, because they would maintain that, yes, there can be like a moment of a more direct, intimate relation with another being where you do not perceive them as it, but you perceive them as real you. Basically, you don't objectify them. You are in like a perfect spontaneous dialogue with them, which there were many caveats to that and many kind of interesting requirements. The requirement, according to one of them, was it Buber, I think? Martin Buber? I think, if I'm not mistaken, was that, yeah, it's all nice, it's all great, but it has to kind of happen by itself. So basically, like, you can, like, approach another human being and, like, decide to, like, engage in, like, a perfect dialogue, deep, respectful relation or temporary relationship with them. That's it kinda only sometimes happens. One might be wondering if that occasional, accidental, sometimes happening was meant to be by some divine grace, or because the one problematic thing about philosophers of dialogue, or the dialogue philosophers, are like, they actually called themselves many things, and usually actually not this one. The calling all, I mean, putting all of those philosophical drifts together and labeling them philosophy of dialogue is kind of a bit of a creative action. That is basically the label that I got introduced to these ideas under. So yeah, the problem with those philosophers was that they tended to be usually very religious in one way or another. Most of them, from what I believe. I would need to restudy the bibliography again. So this dialogue relationship, this like getting into that intimate, like non-objectifying relation with another being was, well, I guess the most perfect of that would be like to enter into that with the God entity, I think. And in some thoughts, I guess it would be where the one relation that all other dialogue relations would naturally kind of stem from. I should spend a bit more time investigating that, because I like the line of thinking, but at the same time, part of me kind of likes that. Funny that I re-stumbled upon those concepts in that kind of haphazardly picked Book of Mastodon. That part of me, or a big part of me, is more fundamentally interested with the concepts of Manitus, and if I can call it that, because Mastodon may have lied to me. The concept that everything has some kind of a spiritual signature, like, or has some kind of like actual spirit within it, behind it, of it, and that I like the practical ramifications of that, which can get complicated, but can also get really awesome. Yes, where were we? Agents, yes, and zero-sum game, yes. Alright. Non-zero-sum game, actually. This is supposed to be a non-zero-sum game. We are in a kind of a optimistic vision of reality. At least slightly. A final important point to make about human nature is that human beings must operate through the use of their reason. Must, as in like should, but do they always? And reason does not operate under violence, deception, or threats thereof. This point is the foundation of objectivist politics. See part 4. Which we are about to get to. Force, fraud, and coercion. Force being a person's use of violence against another. Fraud being a person's use of deception against another. And coercion being one person using threats of either against another. Yes. Are absolute evils because they essentially paralyze the victim's rationality. The victim thus is forced to a subhuman level. The perpetrator is also made subhuman. They are attempting to use methods other than their human reason to live. The point? Force, fraud, and coercion are evil because they damage human life. So this would be stipulating that they also damage the human life of the perpetrator. Because they are, quote, attempting to use methods other than their human reason to live. This would kind of need to be elaborated upon a bit. Anyway, moving on to politics. This is the shortest? This is the shortest section because all the previous groundwork has been laid. And is happily sipping wine in the corner. As stated before, Rand argued that no individual should be permitted to start the use of force, fraud, or coercion against any other individual. This means she accepted what political scientists refer to as a negative liberty. Politics, as defined in a liberal sense, is the field of philosophy that deals with the proper role of the state. The state is defined as an institution that holds exclusive ability to legitimately start the use of force in a specific area. There are multiple answers to this question. For instance, anarchism argues that the state should not exist. Classical liberalism or minarchism argue that the state can be justified if it defends negative liberty. Oh, minarchism, like minimalistic anarchism, I think. Okay. I think. Actually. Minarchism, Rational Wiki. bloody hell, oh, thank you. Okay. Minarchism is a political philosophy advocating the reduction of government functions to a minimum scope, providing people with only bare-bones services such as law and security. It's considered a form of libertarianism. Libertarianism, yes, that's how you read it, I think. And since it finds some useful role for the state, it's incompatible with anarcho-capitalism. Unless, of course, you consider the Friedmanesque voucher a bridge between anarcho-capitalism and minarchism. Friedmanesque voucher. We're not going to be Googling that, no. Another major form of libertarianism, Ayn Rand's views, could be described as minarchist or minarchist. I think it's supposed to be minarchist. I think. Etymology? Discussion, I think they... I think they're not going to explain the etymology to us since they see it as self-evident. So... yeah. Classical liberalism, or minarchism, argue that the state can be justified if it defends negative liberty. Modern liberalism, liberal as understood in the United States, argues that the state has a legitimate role in providing what political philosophers call positive liberty, which basically means the means to do a specific thing, such as, for example, purchase healthcare or receive education. Usually by purchase healthcare or receive it. Okay, I shouldn't, but yes. I'm no communist, okay? Just... No, I'm more on the central, or... I think I'm somewhere around the center, or like... I kind of oscillate like a bit left and a bit right. It's a little bit complicated. As it should be, I guess. Purchase healthcare or receive education, usually by having the state provide that which one should have positive liberty to do. The actual things that individuals should have positive liberty to do are often debated by many modern liberals. One would think so, yes. Conservatism, as the term is presently understood in the United States, argues that the state has a legitimate role in protecting traditional beliefs and customs from threats. What beliefs and customs should be protected and what constitutes a threat to them is debated by many conservatives. Finally, there are ideologies such as fascism or fascism and state socialism, which argue that the state should be the primary organizer of human activity. These questions are interesting. Objectivism supports classical liberalism, minarchism, and argues that the role of the state should be restricted to defending negative liberty. This logically implies that the state should not interfere in any human actions that do not involve force, fraud, or coercion. For example, voluntary economic activity conducted by fully informed, consenting individuals should not be restricted in any way. Voluntary economic activity. Wait, so selling yourself into slavery also? That, like resigning your... will they tackle this topic of like resigning your fundamental human rights. Like that's usually where the line is drawn for the safety of the user, allegedly, and quite likely. Most of the time helpfully, no less. The same applies to capitalist acts between consenting adults, ranging from voluntary prostitution to consumption of drugs. This is what Rand and other libertarians mean by laissez-faire capitalism. I think that's how you read that. Not laissez-faire. Laissez-faire capitalism. I was taught this is pronounced laissez-faire capitalism. They are not defending corruption or peace and love incorporated. Also, they are not using the Marxist or anarchist meanings of the term capitalism. They are referring to free market economics, first and foremost. Peace and Love Incorporated? Peace and Love Incorporated. B is for by and large. Your very best. This corporation has a non-business record that sounds too good to be true, and usually is too good to be true. Oh, okay. It's TV Tropes going on their like usual tangents. All right. Not necessarily related too much. It has to be emphasized again, however, that this is where most of the Flanderization misrepresentation of Rand comes from. The fact that both corrupt types and their critics tend to believe that Rand was in support of amoral, destructive forms of capitalism. To those that have read the political ideologies page, this should not come as a surprise. Rand is a textbook case of classical liberal, and objectivism embraces a very similar theory of human nature to that of the Enlightenment philosophers, i.e. human reason as effective, humans possessing rationality and free will. Note that even amongst objectivists, there is some debate over the finer points of politics. Some are sympathetic to anarchism and think that the ideal society would have no state. Others are more moderate than Rand, but are still undeniably libertarians, generally speaking. But the basic political principle of objectivism is the sovereignty of the individual self over their own life and body. This is often summarized as the non-initiation of force or non-aggression principle, that as long as no one initiates force, fraud, or coercion, all is good. Okay. People could be sold on that. Okay. The doctrine of altruism. We now move from the mind screw to the flame bait. Normally, this would be dealt with under ethics, but several of Rand's arguments against altruism were political in character. The issue of altruism is unquestioningly the area in which the vast majority of misunderstandings of objectivism exist, as well as the area where sacred cows are slaughtered. Okay. Rand did not agree with altruism. She explicitly rejected the doctrine and considered it essentially a suicide morality that was advanced by power-crazed wannabe dictators for the purposes of cloaking their evil plan in the robes of benevolence. To most people, the charges she leveled at altruism wildly vary with what they have been told altruism actually means. To most people, altruism means more or less be kind to other people and refrain from being a jerk. Yeah, it gets complicated when you get to the roots. This common definition of altruism is most emphatically not the definition Rand has in her mind. Nor did she ever say that giving to charitable philanthropic causes was bad, as explained in her non-fiction essays written after Atlas Shrugged. If someone honestly chose to use their money, time that way, it was their business. Only the presumption of it as a moral duty. Yes, nor did she ever say that giving to charitable philanthropic causes was bad, only that the presumption of it as a moral duty was bad. The word altruism was coined by Auguste Comte, or Comte? Comte? Comte. Comte. He's probably not read Comte. Would be kind of nice though. In some parallel reality, perhaps. The word altruism was coined by Auguste Comte. He defined it as live for others and intended it to mean, basically, that a person can be called noble if the ultimate end of their actions is the benefit of others. In other words, the motive of service to others is intrinsically virtuous. It is this definition of altruism that Rand was attacking. And Rand was not the only person to oppose it. John Stuart Mill, a utilitarian philosopher, not an ethical egoist like Rand, was quite shocked at the implications of Comte's definition. For more on this, please see Robert L. Campbell's Altruism in Comte and Rand. And I believe this is the link that I followed some months ago, and I had some great fun with it, and we could actually proceed to have great fun with it because it was quite a fun thing to read indeed. I like these things. I like them a lot. Yes, the Journal of Ayn Rand Studies 7, number 2, spring 2006. So a relatively recent republication. Publication, yes. Pages 357 to 369. Okay. Rand argued that the Comtean altruism essentially results in a situation where the ends justifies the means with others as the end. As long as the intended end is the benefit of others, anything goes. For someone as concerned as she was with individual liberty, this is an understandable concern. Comtean altruism can easily justify revoking the liberty of individuals if it is for their own good. Unfortunately, Auguste Comte's original definition was made much lighter and softer by many people that continued to use the word he originally coined to mean things much less severe than Comte originally intended. This lighter and softer version of altruism has, unfortunately for Rand, had such an influence on ethical discourse that altruism became, in the minds of most people, a synonym for good. And if the good and good for others became equated, then it was only a matter of time before good for the self became equated with evil. It's lovely when you track these things. When you retrace them, yes. And this cog moves that tiny little cog, and that pushes this ball, and this ball, goes through a tunnel, impacts on another thing, and yeah, quite often the consequences are way more easily predictable and visible than in such a machine. What was that called? Oh, wait. We had a sponge. I was worried that I ignored some good person, but no. Wanna become famous? Buy followers, prime and viewers, and blah 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 blah. No, I don't think I really need to become famous. I think I'm fine with my little niche, as small as it is. Okay, so yeah, what was the Rube Goldberg machine? Rube Goldberg, was it? What was it called? What is a Rube Goldberg machine? Can we get like a wiki? Yes. My memory actually worked for once. A Rube Goldberg machine, named after American cartoonist Rube Goldberg, is a chain reaction type machine or contraption intentionally designed to perform a simple task in an indirect and impractically overly complicated way. Yes. It's kind of nice when your memory actually kind of works. Proves itself. That doesn't happen very often. I wanted to say that you should appreciate the moments when it does happen. Yes. As they become fewer and farther between with the passage of time. Yes. Then it was only a matter of time before good for the self became equated with evil. Yes. Rand's case against altruism is composed of multiple arguments. The first is that altruism does not actually define the good. What makes an action good is the intended beneficiary of it, i.e., other people. This, in turn, is the basis for her aforementioned political argument that the doctrine can justify revoking individual rights for the good of others, or others. Rand also saw Comte's altruism not as a new idea, but as a variant of a long string of very old ideas that she opposed. Altruism argues that the self must serve others, but there are many ethical traditions that argue the self must also serve something other than itself in order to justify the self's existence. For instance, monotheistic religions generally argue that individuals must serve God. Feudalism argued that individuals must serve their overlords. The common thread is that the individual must forego being concerned with their own interests and instead live for something outside themselves. They must sacrifice themselves for something else. Rand assembled a very long list of traditions and ideas she believes to be related to, a cause of, or a consequence of, the basic belief that humans' highest moral duty is to serve something that isn't themselves. The idea, she argued, is the foundational cause of this belief. The idea, she argued, is the foundational cause of this belief is original sin. Original sin is not merely the idea that humans are flawed, but that they are intrinsically flawed. To be evil is part of human nature. Objectivism rejects this idea because the nature of things is amoral. Morality applies only in situations where choice exists and because a thing is what it is. It cannot choose its nature. Morality applies only in situations where choice exists, and because a thing is what it is, it cannot choose its nature. Objectivism also argues that original sin is a belief from Platonic realism in epistemology. Original sin is a belief from Platonic realism in epistemology. Yeah, that falls into place, kind of. As stated before, Platonic realism is the idea that universals, including the good, exist in a transcendent realm of perfection beyond our world. An implication of this idea is our world is inherently flawed. It can only approximate the good, and it can never match it. Original sin is the application of this to human beings. Because, according to this idea, humans are intrinsically flawed, they have to justify their existence. How? By sacrifice and service to something greater than themselves. Enter various codes of selfless morality, each promoting a different thing to serve. A tribe, a god, a king, a country, the Aryan race, the universal brotherhood of the proletariat, and the list goes on. In short, Rand argued that Auguste Comte's definition of altruism is the best encapsulator of a long-existent moral tradition based in Platonic misanthropy, exploited by the power-hungry and used to control people. It is used to justify heinous acts and violate individual rights. Finally, it does not actually serve the function of an ethical code in the first place. It fails to give guidance on how to live. It essentially states that one must sacrifice their values, life to others, which in turn makes their life impossible, or at the very least unbearable, in order to deserve the right to live. Likewise, if one chooses to instead live their life with their values, then they are denounced as evil and unfit to live by society. Also, accepting the sacrifices is not acceptable. Accepting the sacrifices is not acceptable. If someone accepts a sacrifice, they could be condemned as selfish. They have made someone else act for their benefit instead of their own. offering sacrifice for others would be moral, but accepting it would be immoral. Immoral, yes. This simple contradiction makes altruism, in Rand's eyes, a morality completely impossible to practice. Interesting point. Once again, offering sacrifice for others would be moral, but accepting it would be immoral. Yes. And that's it. We have some interesting links below. No transhumanism allowed. Occam's razor. How much did they write on Occam's razor? Not too much. This... I might be interested in revisiting this topic as presented by this place. I mean, I both dislike but mostly like their way of simplifying big things into kind of smaller, much smaller and much more accessible, morsellable, biteable paragraphs. Yes. And what were the other options? No transhumanism allowed. Dichter and Denker. Or Dichter and Denker. Harm reduction. School of Salamanca. Shock and awe. Did my phone vibrate or did my floor vibrate? I think it was my phone. Yes. What is harm reduction? There are many things in life that can cause harm to oneself, and this harm can range from something like a simple scratch or stubbed toe to death. Stubbed toe! To death. From a moment of annoyance or anger. Stubbing your toe and death can be related, as we have seen in other examples, side things. From a moment of annoyance or anger to the destruction of a valued relationship or someone undergoing emotional torment. The philosophy of harm reduction, most generally discussed in regard to behaviors generally considered extremely self-destructive, such as drug use and self-harm, but which can be applicable in many other contexts, is a philosophy of being mindful of the harm one's behavior does to oneself, and planning, whether with a therapist or a friend or a family member or even oneself, ways to reduce the harm of a given behavior and to accept oneself, even if the behavior is never thoroughly abstained from or eradicated. Huh. I think I might want to go on with this. I don't... Lots of interesting things. Lots and lots of interesting things. This actually kind of fades in comparison now, because I already know what Occam's razor is, for the most part, I believe. Oh, and this, yeah. How long is this? It's long, but not extremely long. We could do it. Altruism in August. Augusti Comti and Ayn Randi. Ayn Rando. Augusti Comti and Ayn Rando. Yes. That's how they should be named. Okay. I guess that would be it. This was supposed to be a reading of, finishing the reading of Useful Notes on Objectivism, as provided to us by TV Tropes. And that's what it should probably mostly limit itself to, including all those weird digressions that I have thrown in along the way. So, yeah. How long have we been up? 1 hour, basically. Well, that's good. That's not overkilling it, not underkilling it. I don't know if Twitch has any kind of algorithm for, like, I don't think, I mean, it has when it comes to, like, becoming a assistant, no, a collaborator, no, a co-agent, no, partner, yes. Yeah, for that they do have some requirements, but for simply showing your stream to others, I don't. It's less direct than that. So whatever. And I mean, what category am I streaming this in? Officially in education. How many people go into Twitch's education tab? I should probably pretend that I think you're not supposed to do that, and I think you can get like I think you can get some kind of penalty for that. I think if you're like obviously mislabeling your stream as like streaming one game when you're... Is there like any kind of punishment? Or could I perhaps conceivably say that I am streaming Fortnite and just read philosophy to people? I mean, I could also kind of cheat around that, like just have some actual Fortnite gameplay running in the background and... That could be a worthy cause, because I would be getting with the message to people that would not originally, like, maybe consider it, but might actually welcome it, possibly. Optimistically thinking that we kind of crash on the first point, though, on the first prerequisite, because I kind of don't play Fortnite, actually, so... Yes. Or maybe I could employ a friend to that could be an interesting model of streaming that I should probably not divulge the details of right now, of the thought that I have in my head, for fear of someone copycatting that brilliant idea that I will probably never use. It kind of could work, maybe. Yes. So that's it. That's enough rambling for now. I thank you for your attention. I hope that we are all a little bit more edified and educated after this little literary perambulation. Yes. I think we can call it that. Yes. And I shall wish you a good day. It's kind of funny not having to actually burn my... Well, burn, it's only like 5 watts, I think. Or 6. But burn my light bulb to illuminate myself using the actual natural sunlight. Magic. All right. Farewell. Bye. We can think about that one. You know, that could actually work. We might want to think about that.